Okay, we're live. Hello, everybody. We're so excited to have you. I think we're getting a little feedback, but other than that, everything is great. I love my Educational Innovation 360 family. We are so excited. Today, I have a special guest for you, Miss Allison Hanson. Hi.
Hello.
She is amazing. Let me just tell you that. She's an educational consultant that focuses on SEL and the implementation and efficiency and improvement, which is great, especially during these pandemic times. She is constantly driven by her students because she's an educator, and she's committed to fostering, equity-focused approach to social emotional learner. So for every student, because every student needs it right now at this time. Her current work is Senior Programs Associate at kindness.org. Make sure you look that up, you guys. Includes the design and implementation of Learn Kind and pandemic-proof K8 SEL curriculum powered by scientific inquiry. So she currently holds a BA in education and is working on her master's degree and receiving it in education and social policy this May. So that was a lot. Welcome.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live. I would love to get to know everyone a little bit. So if you could write your name, where you're calling in from, where you're watching this from, and what you're grateful for today, that would be wonderful. I'll start. Hi, my name is Allison, but we're there already. I'm calling in from Massachusetts, and today I'm very grateful for the weather. I love fall, my favorite season, and in Massachusetts, the leaves are already starting to turn. So it's real pretty, definitely a favorite. Cassandra, what are you grateful for? Where are you calling in from?
So I'm calling from Indiana. If you guys know, I'm in Indianapolis. But what I'm grateful for is my community, my family. I call them my EI 360 family because they are literally my family. They support me in any way, and I have been truly grateful for my family. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
Hi, Bar. Welcome. Oh, you're grateful for your job. Where do you work?
Definitely put it in the chat. We would love to know where you work.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's great about SEL is that it applies to absolutely every field. What we call SEL in K-12, we call leadership skills and emotional intelligence on LinkedIn and in life. So always great, definitely an important skill to have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I guess, you work as a software engineer. That's awesome. Love it. I love the STEM. So let's get started. I did want to tackle a bit, just some really, basic stuff about SEL, what it is, why it matters. So I am going to share my screen really quickly. And there is a really great...
Bruce, we see you while she's sharing the screen. Yes, we see you from Massachusetts.
Hello.
Grateful for good help.
Love it.
Good
okay. Yes. Here, let's share my application window.
So this makes me so excited that my family showed up. My family always shows up, and that I'm truly grateful for that.
I love that. Yep, they're showing up. Okay, so we can see my screen. Really quickly, let's go over some SEL competencies. So SEL is an organization that I absolutely love. They are, in my opinion, the gold standard of social emotional learning. You can look them up, 𝐃𝐨𝐳.org. They're also in the PDF that we'll be sending later on in the presentation, really just the talk series. And SEL breaks SEL, social emotional learning, down into 5 different core competencies, 5 different skill sets. So you have self-awareness, recognizing emotions, verbalizing them, accurately assessing strengths and weaknesses, and self-concept. So the really like being able to recognize what you're feeling in the moment and being able to communicate that. You have self-management, choosing healthy coping skills, managing stress, setting and achieving goals. All of that comes under self-management. Which leads into responsible decision making, which is what it sounds like. Making ethical decisions based on trade-offs, your emotions, and your goals, which does feed into self-concept. Do I have an accurate self-concept of myself? Does my student have accurate self-concepts of themselves? And how are they using those strengths and weaknesses that they have to build goals? And are those goals SMART goals? So SMART goals, specific, relevant, measurable, achievable, time-bound. Of course, we also have relationship skills, which is establishing boundaries, clear communication, conflict resolution. So can my students interact with one another in a respectful way? And lastly, we have social awareness. Definitely not least, it's all about exhibiting empathy, perspective taking, and recognizing that there are many different social supports that you can have. You can have friends, you can have, a husband, a wife. You can also have a teacher, a counselor, and all of these different relationships in a student's and a person's life serve different emotional and support purposes.
Yeah. This reminds me, because you're so right, especially in these times. We're alone in our homes and we need help and we need the connection with others. So this social emotional learning is so relevant now more than ever. So I definitely agree with, just being aware and empathy and being able to reach out to friends and teachers, reaching out to others who need support.
Absolutely. And here, I'm going to stop sharing. But I wanted everyone to be able to see that visual, especially because in relation to education, social emotional learning takes place. It isn't in a vacuum. It's within schools. Schools are within communities. So you have this multi-layered existence where students are in the classroom, but the classroom is in the school and the school is in the community, where you have to be implementing SEL at all of those levels. Now, we're not talking about many of those levels tonight. Tonight, we're specifically talking about classrooms, and there's a reason for that. Because as much as I love CASEL, they focus on the school-wide, they focus on the district-wide, and what's happening right now, especially because we have many educators who are new to virtual, we have many schools that are new to virtual hybrid learning. They're all out there teachers are looking for SEL supports, and it's not been a very coordinated response. So you have a bunch of teachers who are looking at CASEL and seeing, oh, well, they have a school-wide implementation, but my school, we're still building that out. What can I do now?
Yeah.
So,
you're so right, because many teachers saying, especially my SPED teachers, they are saying, look, we're struggling. We need help and we need help now. And so definitely we're going to hopefully talk and dive into what teachers can do today and now, especially without curriculum. And that is a challenge for some of our teachers.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, I'll start by saying, if anyone has any burning questions, ask them in the chat. Real happy to answer them.
I think you just got love. You just have a lot of love in the chat right now. Bruce saying hi, thanks for this presentation. Latanya Davis, she does autism. She is amazing. She's saying, love the live. So keep going. We're excited to learn about SEL.
Yes. So 2 things off the bat is, one, no matter how you're teaching, whether it's hybrid, whether it's in person, whether it's completely virtual, there are times in your schedule that will naturally lend itself more to SEL implementation. And if you don't have a curriculum right now, chances are, it's hard to look for one. There are curriculums out there. There are resources out there. But again, you don't want it to become another job. Teachers are counselors. They're tech support right now. If we're using our social emotional skills, it has to be SMART. It has to be achievable. There needs to be an achievable goal for teachers to implement SEL right now.
Yes, I agree. And many times we're just pulling from resources we have. And I even know some teachers that would bring in an image and then students would talk about the image, and then they would deeply dive into some concerns they're having. They would make it personal, and then they would make it global. So yes, we are right on task. I love it, Allison. I'm getting excited.
All right, so let's start. Let's go into some of the examples that, you know, I think personally that I've used in my practice to implement SEL, regardless of the content. So a little bit about what I've done in the past in terms of teaching. I started my education journey as a music director for children, ages from 6 all the way up to 15. So a wide variety of skill level in that. A wide variety of skill. Oh, hello. There's Christine is a music and theater teacher as well.
Yeah, so she is really wanting to kind of know, and I hate to kind of
no.
She is like so pumped. I can hear, you know, and so she wants to know, like, as a music teacher, how could she implement SEL skills virtually?
So here's a start: entry and exit tickets. So just for background, an entry and an exit ticket is when a student arrives to class, or maybe they arrive to the Zoom, you have a question on the board, you have a question pinned to the chat, and you tell students, you know, answer this question. Exit questions, you know, answer this question before you leave. Now, a lot of teachers will use this to reinforce content, especially, I mean, you might have math teachers, I know especially, they'll ask, like, you know, solve this math equation, and then we'll go over it. But there's a really great opportunity to harness SEL skills within this, especially, you know, we just talked about what we were grateful for. Yeah. Being grateful, it helps with a positive self-concept, which you have the the self-awareness aspect, but it also has the relationship building. You know, now you know that I like fall. Like we're developing a relationship. And the key to entry and exit tickets isn't doing it once. It's ongoing. So Christine, to answer your question, how, like, the first thing that a music and theater teacher, and really any teacher, can do online to implement SEL is to start with you know, what were you grateful for today? Did something make you smile today? Or even if it's one-on-one, because I know a lot of like musical theater and like it's like vocal coaching, so it's one-on-one. You could even say, like, you know, it seems like you're a little down. Like, would you want to talk about it? Maybe we could sing a song that you like to sing.
Yes,
so really focusing on the energy. And I know that's so much harder when it comes to virtual, but really focusing on the energy.
No, I agree. And, you know, even like talking about mood and having students bring a song, of course, you know, screened by you, bringing a song and talking about mood and saying how things make you feel. So no, these are great activities that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The second activity, are you suggesting teachers spend more time with their students outside class or use time during? That's a really great question, especially right now. Teachers are doing so much. I can't imagine there's a lot of time outside of class that they would have to spend with their students. And that's why it's so much more critical, harkening back to what I said earlier, to find the times in your day that naturally lend itself more to SEL, which tend to be when students enter the classroom and when students are exiting the classroom. That's one of them. You find those times and you have, you know, capitalize on that. So the second activity that I definitely suggest is very, very low lift, is drafting a class charter. So what that might look like is, for this live, I want teachers to feel empowered to be able to implement SEL in their classrooms, however their classrooms are right now, regardless of their grade level. I want teachers to feel equipped. I want them to feel, what else? You know, just setting the expectation. I want people to have a better understanding of SEL, and we do this with curriculum standards. So, you know, at the beginning of a lesson plan that you might receive, it might say, goals are students will learn X, Y, and Z. It's the same thing, except, you know, when you're drafting a charter, you ask students, how do you want to feel when you show up to class? You know, and students might say something like, I want to feel heard. I want to feel respected. And then that naturally lends itself to, you know, what happens if we feel disrespected? You know, what do we want to set in place for that? And what's great about a charter is, you know, teachers can make the rules, but having students build that charter about how they want to feel, what's going on in the classroom, and just on a purely social-emotional level, it makes students stakeholders in their own learning. And it helps with responsible decision making. Ooh, you can also have kids share their favorite song of the day and play as part of the welcome, then do a whip. Oh my gosh, I love this idea. Then do a whip around to share how the song made them feel. That is a great idea.
That is great. That is great. And, even like taking the time, like, during your small group, and really, Allison's right, asking those questions to really get personal with the student, to get to know the student. So later you can use it to get to know them more and more. And so now you have a database of information on these students, and you can have a full conversation and even get to know parents. So I definitely agree, Allison, you're on the right track.
Oh, well, that's the hope. That actually leads really well into my next suggestion, which is, I just kind of call it, what would you do? So some of the best questions that I find in classrooms are, you're talking about a book. Maybe, I know we're into the music theme today, so maybe you're talking about a song. And, you spend a lot of time talking maybe about, like, this is what happens in the song, this is what happens in the book, this is what the character said. But one of my favorite questions to ask students is, well, what would you do in that situation? Like, how do you think that character feels right now? Or like, what do you think led up to this person singing the song? And really contextualizing what is going, it's perspective taking. So it helps with that social awareness. I mean, you can even say for a social studies course, if you wanted to talk about, like, I don't know, education, like, what would you do if you were a teacher? How would you change education?
Yeah.
Actually, flip the script and have them start thinking about that, because that's A, it's critical thinking, but B, it's perspective taking, and it develops empathy.
Yes.
So it's also just it's a question. It's so easy to implement. I mean, you could even, and this one I would say does lend a bit more to the humanities, because how would you feel? What would you do? But I would even go as far as to say, in science, like, how did it feel when we did that experiment? Like, did you feel a sense of accomplishment? Like, what do you think you would do differently now? Even just having students reflect, that's reflective writing. So always including a reflection in whatever assignment that you do, that is SEL. Have your students reflect. Have your students think, what would they do every turn?
Allison, you are right. And, I'm geeking out over here because I love SEL, but it even to incorporate what's happening in the world is, something that we can do, I guess, without really doing so much digging. What's going on in the world, bringing a current event and having students talk about what you feel, what are your thoughts? And so I love your ideas. They are great.
Absolutely.
Yes, so Latanya, she said, I love it. I love it. So we're glad we're using SEL. So I'm getting great comments. So great suggestions. Christina's like, yay, great suggestions from Latanya. So we're getting a lot of feedback from this. So you're doing a wonderful job. This is great.
So my next suggestion is SMART goal setting, which I've already talked a bit about very speedily. So I'll give a bit more of an explanation. So a SMART goal is a goal that is specific. So it's oh my gosh, it's a mnemonic device. That's the phrase I was looking for. So every letter stands for something. It's SMART. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So a goal like, I want my students to have SEL skills would not be a SMART goal because it's not specific. What SEL skills do I want my students to have? And to add to that, what is my audience? If I'm teaching kindergartners, my SEL stuff is going to look very different. My goals, my activities are going to look very different than if I were teaching in 8th grade. So, who am I teaching? And then it also has to be measurable. So I choose relationship skills. I want my students to learn relationship skills. How am I going to measure that? Is it going to be, I have an assignment and they have to use relationship skills, they have to use collaboration in order to succeed in that assignment? And then of course, achievable. And this is where I think especially the pandemic comes in. some SEL activities really lend themselves to in-person. I know even you can even consider an icebreaker an SEL, like the human knot. Very not pandemic proof. Can't do the human knot on virtual. So don't think that's possible. If anyone figures it out, let me know. I'd be interested. But no, so it has to be achievable. So it has to be customizable to your classroom. And of course, relevant given the pandemic. Maybe you want to focus more on mindfulness. Maybe you want to focus more on social awareness and self-awareness for students to realize maybe, and maybe even self-management to help them cope potentially with traumas that many of us are experiencing, a pandemic, economic downturn, racial injustice. This is the time to have those healthy coping skills and help students identify feelings and cope with them.
Yeah, and I'm thinking you're right, because I even think of like brain breaks, from the mindfulness to the breathing to how you're feeling to, all those are great activities that you can stop, pause, and do in the middle of a lesson when you see students are getting frustrated. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this actually, mindful breathing was my last one. And I actually think one of the better ones. I know, so a word of caution. I have seen a lot of schools take mindfulness and use it as a Band-Aid for a wound. If your teachers are working with no prep period, giving them mindfulness training isn't going to help them. You need to give them the space. There are systemic issues that can't, it's that said, mindfulness, yes, mine Yeti's great. That said, mindfulness helps people and helps students respond to what they are experiencing. So while it doesn't solve the stress of the pandemic, it does solve how students might be able to respond. It will solve, it'll help students develop a healthier response to the traumas that they're experiencing, and teachers. So mindfulness is great. In the PDF that I'm going to be sending out it's a bit of a recap. It has a couple of really great resources that I want to highlight. Childmind.org has a lot of really, really great resources on trauma, but also just on mindfulness and how that can be integrated in the classroom. For teachers specifically, createforeducation.org has a program that is helping teachers develop their own mindfulness skills in order to help students develop their mindfulness skills. And really quickly, I do want to mention that one of there's a lot of new research coming out that shows that SEL, A, has to be ongoing, but B, has to be exemplified. So a teacher's SEL skills are critical, very important for students to develop SEL skills. So, if teachers, and this, again, it's another job, but showing and demonstrating SEL is just as important as teaching it. So when you ask students, what are you grateful for? Are you listening? Are you responsive? When you're integrating mindfulness, are you also taking the break? Or, it's important to parrot that behavior that you want, especially for elementary school students who, it's developmentally a lot more is happening. Very important to parrot those skills for them and demonstrate those skills for them.
That really hits home, because if I am modeling that, right, you want to model that, but then, students see the frustration with the technology when you can't get your Padlet to work, or, so students, they understand how you're feeling, but even to think aloud during that frustration, to let them know, it gives you just a human characteristic that, students are just not used to discussing. So I really think definitely you're right. Model best practices and be intentional and listen. So I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this is something that I run into all the time with SEL, is when I say SEL, all of a sudden I hear, oh my gosh, what curriculum are you using? Or, oh my gosh, is your school implementing it? How, that must be such a huge undertaking. And don't get me wrong, it should be. I personally think it should be in every school at the right time. Right now is not that time. I think people should be working toward it, but teachers are struggling right now. Students are struggling right now. So the right now, when there is so much happening, we should be implementing SEL from the ground up. Here, can you give a couple examples of teachers exemplifying SEL? Yes, absolutely. So in critical moments, say a student is, I mean, this also relates to student discipline. If a student is acting out, instead of yelling at them, they could, start talking to them, talk them down. I know I've seen a lot of teachers in person use Squishy to help students who are anxious. So having the supports in your classroom that aren't punitive during discipline, really important to exhibiting SEL skills. Let's see, another one, mindfulness breaks. When you're taking a mind break or your class is taking a break, are you also taking a break? And I know this one is so hard because sometimes we're taking a break and we're grading papers or we're doing stuff in between for other periods because, busy. But if you are also taking that mindfulness break, if you're also meditating with students, that is you exemplifying that behavior.
I totally agree. And even like thinking out, like reaching out to students personally, and just honestly just getting to know them. Or, at the beginning of the year, pre-calling students, say, hey, I'm so excited. You're in my class. I cannot wait to meet you. Those pre-calls to just let students know that you care. And even pre-calling parents to say, I got lucky. I have your child in my classroom. Because you need them as a success coach, right? You need them to help you because their school is their home. So to get them on board right away and make them feel that you are the best, you're doing the best to support their baby. So yeah, there are different ways.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And it really is, it's really just as simple as expressing interest in your students and listening to them. Listening is a real core, it's a really core skill of SEL. It's simple stuff that it's so hard to implement all the time. And it's so hard to implement at a school-wide level. And again, very difficult to implement during a pandemic, no matter what classroom you're in. But it's really simple stuff, really simple, small changes that we can make that can kickstart the SEL process.
Yep. Allison is right. Start small. If it's something so small as a question of the day, that really gets them really thinking about, just their place and time, that's a great way to kind of, just start start and keep going. And then eventually you can add on extra things.
Absolutely. I'll also mention that SEL is an evolving and iterative process. And what I mean by that is you're a stakeholder, you're you as the educator, but your students are also stakeholders. So you want to know how those programs are landing, and you want to know how you want to engage in praxis, which is reflecting after doing and while doing, and then learning from that reflection and improving. And this could look like, your own reflection on what it felt like. Maybe a lesson, maybe like mindfulness doesn't land very well with your classroom. Maybe you're teaching a really rambunctious second grade class and they're having a really hard time focusing. You can reflect on that and think, okay, well, maybe like a meditation isn't as helpful, but we could focus a bit more on how I'm feeling today. You could do like a how I'm feeling today journal. It could be like a really quick 3-question thing, and they could bring it in and this is how they're feeling today. And that might be a bit more, it might land a bit more. So just because you've developed and found SEL activities doesn't mean you're done. We're always evolving. And again, in more robust SEL programs, this looks a lot like surveys. This looks a lot like feedback surveys. But even something as small as just asking your students, like, how did that feel? Like, did you like that lesson? What did you like about it? That is it's crucial.
Yes, and I've seen even like the variants, no more than 3 questions, and even images, right? The last one was a baby Yoda, how are you feeling? And the baby Yoda was like, happy and struggle. And so it was just so adorable, and the students quickly did it, and then they had good discussion around it. So just fun things that we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. Teachers can reflect at the end of class with glows and grows. I love glows and grows.
That is good. Yes, Miss Latanya Davis, glows and grows.
What's a good way to communicate SEL with parents? That is a great question. So something that I personally like to do, I usually like to talk to, so I mean, we interact a lot with students, but parents are a really important partner in implementing SEL. So one thing that you can do, I know, Christine, you're a virtual music teacher. So one thing that you can do is, you know, if you're assigning like, oh, learn this song, you could also talk to the parent and say, you know, I assigned this song. Like maybe you guys could sit down and talk about it, like talk about the themes. You could also ask the parents about their experience with SEL. You know, what do you want to get out of your child's SEL journey? I mean, most parents do want their children to learn SEL. So, you know, considering them a partner in the process.
Yes, I agree. And so some parents, you know, this is academic jargon, right? We don't usually say, you know, social emotional learning, because then they constitute that with something else that it is not. So we definitely say we're working together as a family to really, you know, encourage students to take control of their body, their self, and, you know, work with others, communicate. So we tell them not the jargon, but just the things, that the outcomes and what we want to see all students in a productive society. So
for music, that might look like acting.
yeah,
you know, I really want to focus on the acting this week. You know, like you should talk to your student about like what and talk to your parent student about, or student's parent about, you know, this is like, you know, we had this real big conversation about acting. I would love if you guys could also have that conversation at home. Or I would love maybe your student could perform for the parent. They could have that conversation. You know, there's endless ways to include parents in a low lift way. But it really depends on the activity. So.
Yep. So I think we'll wrap it up. Christine says thank you. And I think this was a wonderful, just wonderful show. So I appreciate you, Allison. And hopefully you will come back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be back.
Yay! So you heard it here. She is coming back. We will have her back again. We had a lot of people in this session. So I appreciate you, Allison, for coming. And thank you for everybody who participated and had great questions in this conversation. And any last thoughts, Allison?
This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very grateful for this. Yeah, no last thoughts. This was great.
All right. So bye for now from EI 360. Bye.